I speak today from a place deeper than politics, deeper than command, deeper than the noise of power, because there comes a moment in a man's life when strength alone stops being enough, when authority no longer answers the questions inside his heart, and when victory feels hollow if it is not anchored in meaning. And that moment came to me when I truly reflected on the mercy of Allah, a mercy so vast, so precise, so overwhelming that it forced me to confront myself not as a leader, but as a servant of responsibility. Because I have lived in struggle, I have witnessed pressure, I have seen what happens when nations are reduced to statistics and dignity is treated as negotiable. And in such a world you are taught that firmness is survival, that mercy is dangerous, that hesitation is weakness. Yet the closer I moved toward leadership, the clearer it became that power without mercy corrodes the soul, that discipline without compassion becomes cruelty, and that authority without moral grounding eventually destroys the very people it claims to protect. And when I reflected on Islam, on the attributes of Allah, especially His mercy, something inside me shifted irreversibly. Because Allah is not distant, He is Al-Rahman, the most merciful, a mercy that precedes punishment, and Al-Rahim, a mercy that continues even when the world turns its back. And these are not symbolic names. They are principles that shape how a believer understands justice, patience, struggle, and accountability. And what shocked me was not the existence of this mercy, but its depth, its reach, its refusal to abandon humanity, even when humanity fails itself. Because Allah's mercy does not disappear in chaos. It does not retreat in hardship. It does not collapse under pressure. It remains open for those who reflect, who return, who strive sincerely to do better. And I began to ask myself, how many leaders in history lost their way because they believed fear was more effective than fairness? How many movements collapsed because mercy was replaced with ego? And how many nations bled because compassion was mistaken for weakness? And then I looked inward, at the weight of decisions, at the lives affected by words spoken and orders given, at the youth watching closely, at the future silently forming beneath every action. And I understood that true leadership is not domination. It is restraint. It is accountability. It is the courage to choose justice even when force is easier. And Islam teaches this balance with unmatched clarity. Because Allah's mercy does not cancel justice, it completes it. It does not erase responsibility, it deepens it. And this understanding shook me because it forced me to abandon the illusion of self-sufficiency, to accept that no man, no matter how disciplined, no matter how committed, stands beyond the need for mercy. And when a leader forgets this, he becomes rigid, angry, and disconnected. But when he remembers it, he becomes grounded, patient, and conscious of consequence. And what struck me most was realizing that Allah's mercy is not reserved for perfection. It is extended to struggle, to sincerity, to repentance, to those who fall yet refuse to surrender their conscience. And this realization reshaped how I view failure, not as an end, but as a call to return stronger. Reshaped how I view patience, not as delay, but as controlled strength. Reshaped how I view justice, not as revenge, but as balance. And reshaped how I view leadership, not as privilege, but as amana, a trust that will be questioned beyond this world. And when this truth settled in my heart, the noise of power faded, the intoxication of authority dissolved, and what remained was clarity. The clarity that no nation rises through oppression, no leader succeeds through arrogance, and no future survives without moral discipline. And Islam, through its emphasis on mercy, humility, justice, and accountability, offers not weakness, but resilience, not chaos, but order, not submission to men, but alignment with principle. And standing in this reflection, I realize that Allah's mercy is not something to be admired from a distance. It is something to be embodied, especially when decisions are hardest, especially when anger is justified, especially when the world demands brutality. Because mercy in those moments is not softness, it is mastery over the self. And this understanding marked the beginning of a deeper awakening within me, an awakening that forced me to question not only how I lead, but why I lead, not only what I fight against, but what I stand for. And this is where my shock truly began, not as surprise, but as transformation. Because once a man truly understands the mercy of Allah, he can no longer lead blindly, act recklessly, or separate power from responsibility. And this realization became the foundation of everything that followed. And as this awakening deepened within me, I began to understand that the mercy of Allah is not a passive idea, meant only for prayer mats or quiet moments of reflection. It is an active force that reshapes how a leader thinks under pressure, how a nation heals after wounds, and how a man restrains himself when he has the ability to be harsh. Because there are moments when anger feels justified, when force feels efficient, when silence feels safer than fairness, yet it is precisely in those moments that the mercy of Allah stands as a test, a mirror placed before the heart asking whether power will be used, to elevate or to crush, whether authority will be exercised with conscience or consumed by ego. And I realize that leadership without this internal discipline becomes dangerous, no matter how noble its Logan's sound, because history is full of men who claimed righteousness while abandoning restraint. And Islam does not allow that contradiction. It demands that strength be guided, that justice be balanced, that intention be purified, and this understanding weighed heavily on me as I reflected on the struggles of my people, the patience of those who endure quietly, the hopes of those who believe tomorrow can be better. And I saw clearly that a nation does not only need protection from external threats, it needs protection from moral decay, from despair, from leaders who forget that every decision leaves a mark, and Allah's mercy addresses this at its root, because it teaches that no matter how severe the challenge, there is always a higher standard to answer to. A reminder that power is temporary but accountability is permanent, and this realization humbled me deeply, because it stripped away the illusion that leadership grants immunity from error, reminding me instead that leadership increases responsibility, increases scrutiny, and increases the weight of consequences. And when a leader internalizes this, he moves differently. He listens more carefully, he acts more deliberately, and he resists the temptation to rule through fear, because fear creates obedience without loyalty, silence without healing, and order without justice. While mercy, when combined with firmness, creates stability rooted in trust, resilience rooted in dignity, and unity rooted in shared values. And Islam does not separate these principles. It weaves them together seamlessly, showing that mercy does not weaken justice, it strengthens it, and that discipline does not require cruelty, it requires self-control. And this understanding transformed how I view patience not as delay but as strategic endurance, how I view forgiveness not as forgetting, but as refusing to let hatred define the future, and how I view struggle not as chaos, but as a test that refines intention. And what struck me profoundly was realizing that Allah's mercy is not limited by borders, ethnicity, or status. It reaches the oppressed and the powerful alike, judging neither by appearance nor by title, but by sincerity and action. And this truth dismantles arrogance completely, because no uniform, no position, no applause can shield a heart from accountability. And when this reality settles within a man, it reshapes his priorities, pulling him away from vanity and toward service, away from impulse and toward reflection, away from domination and toward stewardship. And I began to see that the greatest danger facing any movement is not opposition, but internal corruption, not external enemies, but forgotten principles. And this is why Allah's mercy shocked me so deeply, because it does not excuse failure. It confronts it with hope. It does not ignore wrongdoing. It calls for correction. And it does not abandon those who fall. It invites them to rise with humility. And in this balance lies the strength of a society that can endure hardship without losing its soul. And as I carried this understanding forward, I felt the weight of leadership transform from burden into trust, from pressure into purpose, because when actions are guided by mercy and accountability, fear loses its grip, anger loses its control, and decisions gain clarity. And this clarity is what sustains a leader when applause fades, when criticism rises, and when choices become lonely, because mercy anchors the heart to something higher than public opinion, something steadier than power itself. And this is why I say that encountering the mercy of Allah did not make me weaker. It made me more aware, more restrained, more responsible. Because a man who understands mercy does not act recklessly. He acts deliberately, knowing that every step leaves a trace. Every word carries weight, and every moment of authority is a test that will one day be answered. And this realization continues to guide me, not as a conclusion, but as an ongoing journey, one that demands constant reflection, constant humility, and constant alignment with justice. Because once a man truly recognizes the mercy of Allah, he cannot return to ignorance, he cannot lead without conscience, and he cannot separate strength from morality. And this understanding continues to unfold within me, shaping what comes next. And as this journey continued, I began to see that the mercy of Allah does something even more profound than guiding decisions or softening hearts. It reshapes the very way a man understands time, struggle, and destiny. Because when you believe that mercy is always present, you no longer rush recklessly, you no longer panic at resistance, and you no longer surrender to despair. And this understanding became vital for me as I faced moments where outcomes were uncertain, where pressure was relentless, and where the easiest path would have been to harden myself completely. Yet Islam teaches that haste is often born from fear, while patience is born from trust, and trust is impossible without faith in Allah's wisdom and mercy. And I realize that many failures in leadership are not failures of strategy, but failures of inner discipline, failures to control ego, anger, and pride. And Allah's mercy confronts these weaknesses directly, because it reminds a man that he is not the center of the universe, that history did not begin with him and will not end with him, and that every test has a purpose beyond immediate understanding. And this realization humbled me deeply, because it taught me that leadership is not about forcing outcomes, but about aligning actions with principles and allowing results to unfold with patience and way. A leader operates from this place. He no longer fears temporary setbacks, because he understands that loss can be instruction, delay can be protection, and hardship can be refinement. And this perspective changed how I interpreted opposition, not as a personal attack, but as part of a larger trial meant to expose intentions, clarify values, and strengthen resolve. And what struck me most was recognizing that Allah's mercy is present even in moments that feel harsh, because mercy is not always comfort. Sometimes it is correction, sometimes it is restraint, sometimes it is the removal of what distracts a man from his true responsibility. And Islam does not promise ease without effort, it promises meaning within effort. And this distinction transformed how I viewed sacrifice, because sacrifice guided by purpose does not break a man, it sharpens him. And I saw clearly that societies collapse not when they struggle, but when they lose meaning, when hardship feels pointless, when leaders speak of strength without offering hope. And Allah's mercy restores meaning, because it connects struggle to accountability, patience to reward, and discipline to dignity. And as I reflected on this, I felt an increasing responsibility to embody these principles publicly and privately, because hypocrisy destroys trust faster than failure. And Islam places immense weight on sincerity, reminding that actions are judged by intention, and this awareness forced me to constantly examine my own heart, to question whether decisions were driven by justice or ego, by service or image, by principle or pressure. And this internal accountability became a shield, protecting me from arrogance when praised and from bitterness when criticized, because both extremes can corrupt judgment, and mercy, when understood properly, keeps a leader balanced between humility and firmness, compassion and discipline. C. Urge and restraint. And this balance is rare, yet essential, because a nation does not need leaders who are perfect. It needs leaders who are conscious, leaders who understand that every command echoes beyond the moment it is given, and that authority exercised without reflection leaves wounds that take generations to heal. And Allah's mercy addresses this by demanding awareness, by reminding that every soul has value, that every injustice leaves a stain, and that every act of fairness strengthens the foundation of society. And this understanding deepened my respect for the moral framework Islam provides, because it does not allow leadership to drift into chaos or tyranny. It anchors it firmly to accountability. And as I carried this awareness forward, I began to see leadership less as a position and more as a continuous test. A test of patience when results are slow, a test of humility when success arrives, and a test of conscience when power is unquestioned. And through all of this, the mercy of Allah remained the constant, not excusing mistakes, but allowing growth, not erasing responsibility, but offering guidance. And this is why I say that encountering this mercy was not a single moment, but an ongoing transformation, one that continues to challenge me to rise above impulse, to resist ego, and to act with clarity, even when the path is difficult. Because once a man truly internalizes the mercy of Allah, he no longer seeks validation from the world, he seeks alignment with truth, and this alignment becomes the compass that guides him forward, shaping not only his actions, but his silence, his patience, and his vision for what lies ahead.